Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedCommsNetworking.com and the associated websites. So you'll find all sorts of information, services, resources for people who work in the global community of MedComms, by which I mean people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, and medical publishing. But importantly, also lots of resources for people who want to learn more about our business, want to maybe join MedComms and get a new job. And you'll find lots of information for people looking for entry-level jobs at a website called firstmedcommsjob.com. So lots of information resources. Go and have a look if you haven't seen them already. One of the things we're doing at the moment, doing lots of these webinars, recording them, putting them on NetworkPharma TV, where you'll find hundreds of videos now. Today I'm absolutely delighted that we've got the guys from Media Contacts with us. We're going to talk about tips for going out and getting a job in MedComms. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Maz for a short presentation, followed by a Q&A session. So those of you in the audience today, please remember we want to hear your comments and questions and observations in the chat boxes. But first, over to you, Maz. There you go.
Thank you. Just share. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Peter, for having us. And thank you for everyone for joining. Seems like we've got a good audience this morning. So we're going to go through a short presentation on looking for a job in MedComms. We're very aware that it might be quite a mixed audience. So some of you may already be in the industry, may already be working, and there may be some that are looking to secure their first job. So we've tried to keep that in mind with our presentation. So to introduce ourselves, the three of us work for Media Contacts, and we are a recruitment agency who focus on the media and communications sector. The three of us specifically work on our healthcare desk. As I said, my name's Maz. I'm a senior consultant here, and I've been working here for about 3 years. Maybellene, do you want to?
Hi, I'm Maybellene. I am a recruitment consultant at Media Contacts, and I'm the newest member of the team.
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm the director here on the healthcare desk, and I've been here nearly 16 years now.
Great. So first off, a quick snapshot of the market, really. If you're thinking of a new job at the moment, you're certainly not alone. I think if anyone's been reading the news, you will have seen demand across all industries. And we're here to tell you that that's not purely for lorry drivers or vegetable pickers. We've certainly seen in the MedComms industry, recruitment is booming. I think there's a few reasons for that. I mean, in terms of experienced people, a lot of people have held off for the last year or two for obvious reasons. There's been a lot of uncertainty, so people haven't really been out looking for a new job. And then I think MedComms as an industry has also been very lucky to avoid some of the negative things that have come in other industries along with the pandemic. In fact, from what we're seeing, a lot of our MedComms agency clients are actually booming. Teams are growing. There's a huge demand for staff, and vacancies have been kind of higher than we've seen in a long time. I think Julia will attest, having worked in the industry for a long while, that this is the busiest she's ever seen it. So yeah, and I think in terms of from a perspective of someone either wanting to get into the industry or someone potentially looking to move jobs, that's obviously great news. It means there's a lot more variety. You're able to be a bit more picky in your job hunt, perhaps command higher salaries as well, which we've certainly seen. And also with things like flexible working, remote working, these kind of hybrid questions, we've seen a lot more accommodation for that. That's been obvious over the last little while, but moving forward as well. So why move jobs? So as we sort of said, we know that a few of you, or maybe a lot of you, will be looking to get into the industry, and we're going to come on to that. But if you are in a job at the moment, whether it's in MedComms or in another industry, I think the first stage in looking for a new job is to really question what your reasons are. Why are you not enjoying your current position? What is it about your current role or company that has made you decide that now's the right time to look for look for a new job. Money usually isn't the primary factor, and most interviewers will also see through kind of vague, woolly reasons around needing a new challenge. So I think really questioning your motivations, it might be that all your friends have recently left. It might be that you're really not enjoying your counts, so you're feeling a bit undervalued where you are. In which case you really need to question those things to come up with a kind of clear narrative, which will, number one, allow you to think about what's the best next step for you, and number two, it will also make you a better interviewer. Julia.
So once you've decided that now really is the right time to move, not in 6 months' time, then you need to work out what you want next. So have a really good look at what you've been doing already, what you like about your current job, what you enjoy about it, what you'd like to do more of, what you've read about that other agencies are doing, and work out the nature of the work that you want to be doing, the types of projects, maybe certain therapy areas you're interested in, and really work out what it is that you want. Maybe you just want something different, but in which case try and have some sort of idea of what that might look like. And think in terms of the job itself. Do you want line management responsibilities? Do you want to specialise in certain areas? Are you very interested in patient advocacy? Do you enjoy working on publications? Think about what you want there. Also think about training and development. What aspects of that have you enjoyed so far? And again, what you're looking for in the future. What's your long-term goal and where do you ultimately want to be? For other people, a lot of it's about the cultural aspect. Maybe you're someone who really wants to be in an office and your current company is all about working remotely now. Maybe you're loving working remotely and you don't want to go back into an office. So work those things out. Then there's work-life balance, how many hours you want or prepared to work. There's never been a better time than right now to negotiate on those. And then there are other things like diversity and inclusion, social conscience. Do you want to be somewhere where you'll get to work a couple of days a year pro bono for certain causes? That different things matter to different people. When it comes to how you're going to be rewarded, again, you're in a better time than there has ever been and probably ever will be in the future to negotiate on that, assuming you've got some experience, and we'll come on to it if you're entry level. But have a look realistically. Are you being paid properly? What should you be on? What do you want? How would you like that to be in terms of how much, do you want somewhere where there's a really generous pension? Is an enhanced maternity policy important to you? So again, have a really clear idea in your head of what you want. And then of course, location, as I just touched on about, whether you want to be remote or have some sort of flexibility, but keep it all reasonable. However, if you're new to the industry, you're not really in so much of a strong position to negotiate. The key thing is to get your foot in the door. Once you've got 6 months to a year's experience in an agency, you're less of a perceived risk and your value is going up. So you're less likely to be able to negotiate, but you do still need to really research the area, really understand what the agencies do in order to help with your narrative about what you're looking for and why this is what you want. The last thing an employer wants to hear when they ask you why you want to work in MedComms is that I'd like to use my science, but I don't want to work in a lab anymore. That's why you don't want to be doing what you're doing now, not why you do want to be working in MedComms. So, have a really good look at the MedComms networking website, for example. There's so much information on there. There's more than in any other industry that I know. So there's really no excuse for anyone in this sector not being able to say why this is what they want to do. There are lots and lots of different roles, and you may well change your mind once you're in an agency. But you need to at least have a good awareness of what those different roles are and what's entailed, and then you can think about what best suits you now. That might well change in the future once you've got that foot in the door and seen different ways of working. And then networking. If you've got any friends in the industry, fantastic. Talk to them, meet them. ask them questions, talk to specialist recruiters. Though most entry levels aren't via recruiters, any good recruiters, and certainly we are more than willing to give you some advice or look at your CVs, for example. Look at industry websites, look at agency websites, look at who works there, look at their employees on LinkedIn. Are there any synergies that you have with those people? Did you study at the same place, for example? And don't be afraid to ask questions and get to know them. So once you've really worked out what you want next, it's time to refine your CV. Now, if you're already in an agency, you're going to be looking at it differently to the first time round. This time, it's not about positioning yourself to get into the industry. It's looking at that next move. So it's not light years apart, but instead of focusing on every transferable skill, you're going to be more focusing on achievements or things that aren't going to be obvious. So assuming a degree of intelligence on the part of the reader, we know what an account manager does, but what we might not know that in your agency that involves taking the lead on a particular global account and being fundamental in a launch, or having also got involved in the content. So think about what is going to be impressive to a potential employer and make them want to interview you, because your CV is the document to get you that interview. If you're entry level, then it's going to be much more about focusing on the transferable skills that someone in an agency wants to see. So have you got proven experience in teamwork? Perhaps you were a member of a sports team, perhaps you worked in a leisure facility in your spare time, whatever it might be. If you want to be a writer, then you need to mention everything that you write and demonstrate your flexibility in order to adapt to different audiences. Whatever you do, make sure that your LinkedIn and all your social media profiles are aligned. It's no good saying that you want the next step up in MedComms or you want to get into the industry as a medical writer if your LinkedIn page says that you want to be a researcher or a scuba diver, and people will check, they absolutely will. In the same way that I would hope that you will all check whoever is going to interview you and look into their background, they absolutely will look into yours. So make sure that it's all up to date, aligned, and that the attention to detail is absolutely perfect.
So now that your CV is all up to date, where to begin? As a more experienced candidate, that's when a recruiter would really come in handy, because the positions that most recruiters do have are more senior positions. But for the more junior candidates, making use of a recruiter is still very important. As Julia alluded to, because of our market knowledge, we'll be able to coach you even if you are applying directly to agencies. But making use of a recruiter means that we can, after having those first-hand conversations with you, we can align some agencies that would really work to your strengths after getting a real feel for what you're looking for and what you want for your next challenge. Another really important point is making connections. So a webinar like this is perfect. Getting your foot in the door, showing that interest, making those industry connections that can help you gain more knowledge or can lead to you getting your next role. So any opportunity to network, whether that's on LinkedIn or, for example, a webinar like this, make use of that. And also job boards, they're a good way to see what roles are in the industry, but this is where a recruiter comes in handy because not all roles are on job boards. And you can also make use of websites such as nextpharmajob.com, as well as First MedComms jobs. So just make use of all of the resources that you have to get your foot in the door or to help you transition into your next role. So now on to interviews. Now, as Maz alluded to, the market being the way it is, you're probably going to have a number of interviews. So preparing for these is paramount. In terms of preparing, you need to do your research. So you need to know what the format of the interview is going to be. So is this going to be on Zoom? Is it going to be on Teams? Is it going to be face-to-face? And bearing in mind, some interviews are now face-to-face, so this shouldn't shock you. It should be something that you are prepared to handle. You need to know who's interviewing you, and you also need to practice. So if this is Zoom, you need to get a good area in your house or wherever you're going to be doing this. It's well lit, you have good internet connection so that you are prepared and you're not shocked, and you know how to use your own technology to make sure you are as comfortable as possible when it is time. A big thing is timings. So if you are working with a recruiter, a good recruiter will ensure that all of your interviews are grouped in a way that you're at first stage within the same time period, so that you receive your offers at the same time, you can look over them, and you're not in a position where you have an offer but you're waiting for another company, and now you're making people wait and it's making you feel uneasy. So whether you are working with a recruiter or you're doing this by yourself, timings are very important. And whether this is your first interview or you've had hundreds of interviews because you're a seasoned professional, practice is paramount, because you can practice with a recruiter. They obviously will know the client, so they'll know exactly what the client is looking for and they can coach you in that sense. But a recruiter might also know some of the questions they've asked. So a mock interview with your recruiter is an amazing way to practice and also get really comfortable in the interview format, as well as doing a dry run for some of the questions you might actually get. But if you're not working with a recruiter, anyone around you, your parents, a partner, just to get comfortable being interviewed, because a lot of the time interviewers ask generic questions, so you need to be comfortable with those as a great starting point. Another very important thing is knowing what is going to be involved in your interview. So besides your interview and whoever that is with, you might have a writing test or a psychometric test. More so with a psychometric test, you can Google good practice psychometric tests to make yourself comfortable so that you are able to perform your best in the psychometric test. And when it comes to a writing test, for more junior candidates, don't be overwhelmed by this. They know that this is your first entry into the industry. They're not expecting you to write like a medical writer. They're looking for promise. They're looking for you to just try your best and show potential. So that's what you need to be doing. And definitely as well, if you're working with a recruiter or you can speak to us about this, we would be happy to give you any tips, but definitely just try your best and don't get overwhelmed. They know what level you're at. And another very important thing is feedback. So if you're working with a recruiter, I'm sure a good recruiter will be looking to push the agency to give you feedback so that you can improve. But if you're not working with a recruiter, it's very important that you know who your HR contact is, especially if it's been a week and you haven't heard back, so you know who to get into contact with, because HR departments can get very busy, and it's important that you know what you need to improve on for next time, because feedback is how you will improve, and getting that feedback will ensure that the next time you are successful.
So rejection is never nice, but unfortunately it's a sad fact of life, and no one gets every job they go for. So it's a necessary evil, but it can be very, very constructive. So when the answer's no, you know, and if you don't have much of an explanation, don't be afraid to reply and say, thank you, I really enjoyed the process. Sorry to hear that I didn't get the job or I didn't pass the test, but it would be very useful for me if you could possibly give me some sort of explanation or constructive feedback, and then take that on board, discuss it with someone you trust, and make sure you get it right next time. But ideally, it won't be a rejection, it will be success. So you've got the offer, or even better, you've got the nice problem to have, and you've got multiple offers. So it's time to weigh up the pros and cons. So don't just look at what the salary is, look at when the next review is going to be, what are the career prospects really, what's the team like, how do you feel that how do you envisage yourself working there, what are the clients like, what are their plans, is it a big network with lots and lots of opportunities? Is it a smaller independent where you're going to get responsibility earlier? So it's a really look into it. When you've decided which is the one that you really want to accept, if the offer isn't exactly what you were hoping for, now is the time to negotiate. If you're working with a recruiter, they will do that for you if you would like them to. If you're applying directly, you will need to handle that yourself. If you're entry level, you're not in such a position to negotiate. But if you feel that you are being offered something below market rate, or there's something about the balance of work life or location that could be altered, this is the time to do it.
Okay, so is that the end? You've accepted the offer that you want, you've got a brand new job, you're thrilled, you can sit back with a glass of wine and forget all about it. Not quite. So perhaps, as we've mentioned, in the current market, you might have multiple offers, or it may be the case that you're in process for a few different jobs. So you're going to have to let people down. If you are working with a recruiter, unfortunately, we get that horrible job of letting down other offers and pulling you out of other interviews. If you're not, make sure to do so in a sort of gracious manner. All the obvious stuff, don't ghost them, don't disappear because you feel awkward about it. You know, it's a small industry, and if you go on to have a long career, I'm sure you will probably cross paths with these people in the future. So it's really important to be communicative and you know, thank people for their time and all the really obvious stuff. I think other things that you'll have to think about now is obviously handing in your notice to your current company. So they're going to obviously be disappointed to lose you. We always encourage people to write a formal resignation letter. It doesn't matter how close you are to your manager. We really try and tell people that, you know, just pulling them aside and having an informal conversation isn't really the way to go about it. Make sure you write a formal letter outlining, you know, your reasons. You don't need to go into tons of detail. I'm sure they'll want to speak to you in a bit more detail anyway, but have that letter, send it, use the appropriate channels and do it formally. And that brings me on to the issue of counter offers, which we've been seeing a lot more of recently, particularly because the market has been so competitive. So I think if you're an experienced person working in MedComms, if you're a senior medical writer, if you're, you know, an account manager, account director, and you hand in your notice, you're very likely to receive a counter offer at the moment. So I think it's really important to go into these meetings remembering your motivations for leaving. We usually advise people to be quite wary about counter offers. First and foremost, it raises the question why you weren't given that promotion or, you know, that pay rise before you were going to leave. And they generally are short-term plaster. As we said, it's not always just about money. There were probably other issues going on as well. And no doubt 3 to 6 months down the line, you'll be back having to interview through 3 processes again and probably end up leaving anyway. If you need to think about a start date for your new company, sometimes they'll want you to start as quickly as possible. Most places obviously will be aware that you're working a notice, but there are ways you can go about trying to shorten that using leave that you've not used, or, you know, just talking to your manager and seeing if there's any way that can be shortened. So don't be scared to do that if you need to. Finally, just while you're waiting to start your new job, make sure you stay in contact. Don't go sort of incommunicado during that month while you're working down your notice. Make sure you're responding to emails from your new company, getting anything done that they've sent you in terms of sort of administration stuff. Perhaps there's research you could be doing and things you could be doing to give you the best possible start. Another quick note on recruiters is that if you have used a recruiter, you know, the best recruiters will want a long-term relationship with you. They'll want to help you through your whole career. So make sure you stay in touch. We like chocolates, we like wine, we like a recommendation on LinkedIn, anything. So use that. And it's another thing to add is that nerves are normal. The night before you're due to start a new job, you probably won't sleep very well, but that's probably a sign that you've done the right thing. So once you've settled in, everything will be better. So that's it really. The last note we just wanted to say is, if you're perhaps on the webinar and thinking about freelance opportunities or moving to freelance, that's something that we would absolutely be able to talk to you about. It's well beyond the scope of today, unfortunately. There's a whole host of things you need to think about specifically to do with that. But anyone that is thinking about that, we have plenty of experience talking to people through all the things you might want to think about. And also we do get a lot of freelance opportunities through as well. So do get in touch. So here are our contact details. As Peter said at the beginning, we're very, very happy to speak to anyone looking to get into the industry. We're very happy to speak to people thinking about a move, happy to go through CVs or anything else that might help. I'm sure Peter will send around the email addresses afterwards, but thank you so much for listening and giving us your time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Maz. Cheers. If we lose the slides now, members of the audience that are here on the day, as it were, we'd love to hear your comments and questions, or sorry, read your comments and questions. You've got two text boxes, a chat box and a Q&A box. Use those to send us your questions and your comments, and we'll weave that into the discussion. I wanted to just cover off, if I can, because we could go in a lot of different directions with this sort of a discussion. I'm going to sort of close down a couple of those avenues by saying that what I wanted to do today was concentrate on the sort of process, the job application process and what's around that. There's an awful lot of information on firstmedcommsjob.com about MedComms, the business, about different roles within the business. You'll find some very good careers guides. You'll find a host of webinars, discussions, articles, and so on. So when it comes down to talking about specific job titles and things in MedComms, I'm going to basically point you back at First MedComms Job. In terms of entry level, people tend to come in on account management or on the writing side, but don't forget there are other opportunities like on the editorial side or the creative side and so on. We'll pick up on some of these questions in a little bit more detail. But as I say, don't forget there's an awful lot of information on firstmedcommsjob.com. So go and have a look at that. We've got a number of questions coming in already, but what I wanted to start with, can I? And I don't know who wants to take this, Julia. You're sort of you've announced yourself as the one that's been around for quite a while. Just talk a little bit more about the overall marketplace, as it were, because you guys don't just focus on MedComms. You focus on media, communications, healthcare communications, advertising, PR, whatever. I know our definitions will all vary a little bit, but just talk a little bit. I'm just interested from an overall point of view across the communications type spectrum, and what's happened over the last year or two. MedComms is booming. We're all saying that, but what's happening on the sort of the more creative side or the advertising side of web? Just a few words on that front.
Yeah, sure. Well, they're all really, really busy. Pretty much every single client we have is saying that they've never been so busy. That the first year of lockdown was the busiest they'd ever had. After the initial couple of weeks of battening down the hatches and thinking, oh God, what's happening now? Suddenly their work took off, and nobody seems to be too sure why. Now, it would be obvious if they were working on COVID or respiratory products. But it's not just that, it seems to be every other area as well. So, it seems to be cataclysmic change in a good way in healthcare at the moment, in terms of lots of new treatments and areas opening up. Things like rare diseases is huge at the moment. So lots and lots of exciting new stuff going on, new ways of working. So, every agency everywhere seems to be taking on more people through growth, as well as the fact that there's been suppressed career movement for a couple of years, which means that they're all having lots of resignations, and not necessarily because there's anything bad about where they are, just because the natural turnover has been stifled for a while. So everywhere is really, really busy. Every HR department is rushed off its feet. They're all screaming down the phone at us every day. We need 20 of these, we need 30 of those. So yes, really, really busy across anything in healthcare, whether it's PR, advertising, MedComms. But as an agency as a whole, we work for various publishing organisations. We have somebody who specialises in a lot of financial journalism, events, conference production, all these areas, general PR as in non-healthcare. And again, I think spending's been suppressed for a long time, and it's a bit of a perfect storm. As all the negative things of Brexit have also had a positive impact in terms of demand. whilst not supply. So, across other sectors as well. So there never has been a time like this, and it's very unlikely in our lifetimes ever will that there be such high demand. Now, it's always high in healthcare. So, I think we can all get a bit blasé and think, well, there's always going to be demand in healthcare, which there is, but it's not going to be quite so strong. It's not going to be quite such a good time to list your demands. For example, every agency has allowed everyone to work remotely for obvious reasons, but that's starting to change. I can think of at least one where they're insisting people come back 2 or 3 days a week. Now, that isn't all negative. One of the reasons is that they're finding people working from home are working much longer hours because they don't switch off. Whereas if they're forced to come into the office, they have to put boundaries in place. They have to travel home. They have to stop work. So these sorts of things, as these policies are coming in, now is the time to have written into your contract what you want. And if you want to be 100% remote, pinpoint that now, because if you wait 6 months, a year, 2 years, who knows when this is going to change? It won't, it won't always be like this.
Okay. And in terms of flexible working, I mean, and Maz, maybe from your point of view, how are you seeing that change? And Julie's just sort of touched on the fact that companies are going through some changes there. Hybrid working, everyone's talking about hybrid and so on. But again, just a few words on that front. How are you seeing that play out in practice in terms of companies either going more virtual or coming back to the office or hybrid? Just give us a bit of a flavour of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think certainly in MedComms, there's been quite a bit more hesitancy, I'd say, than perhaps certain other industries. I think a lot of people, given it's healthcare, it's pretty obvious that people would be a bit more cautious and don't want to be rushing back in the tail end of a pandemic that might come and sting us, So I think.
So sorry, the caution is about coming back in the office.
Come back in the office, exactly.
Okay.
Certainly with some of the big agencies, in terms of just being cautious as a business, there's been quite a lot of that. I think people have obviously really enjoyed working from home or having the flexibility to work from home a bit. I think what we've seen on the recruitment front is that, which is kind of fairly obvious, that if you're more senior, you're probably going to be allowed more flexibility, given that you're more likely to live, for example, if it's London that we're talking about, then you might live outside of London, and also just the sort of trust to be able to get on and do that. Whereas I think if you're brand new to the industry, we are seeing agencies starting to want people to come in, and that's pretty obvious with the training bit. How can you learn something that's brand new to you without seeing it in practice and things? So I think we are seeing agencies start to kind of say, well, we really do want most people in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and I think it is starting to get there again.
Okay, so that's an important point. I mean, people looking at moving, let alone coming into the business, it's not quite the free for all that maybe some people think it is, in terms of, well, I can now just work from wherever in the world sort of thing. You're saying that the companies are starting to sort of come up with policies, as it were, and maybe it's 2 days in, 3 days out, or whatever. So there's particularly at some levels, although some of the senior people really can do what they want, almost. That's the wrong way of putting it, but you know what I mean. So there's quite a lot of flexibility built into the system, but you're seeing companies tending to go, let's have some structure here because that helps us all. Yeah. Okay. Let's just talk about the entry level for a little bit. Maybellene, sorry, you're involved with the entry levels, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I thought, and just let's talk about the entry levels a little bit. And again, it's booming. Yeah, there's everyone's looking for lots of entry level people to come in, sort of thing. What's your advice to people in terms of coming into the business, in terms of how they're going to see a change, from academia, say, into the business? What are the sort of main criteria and points that you put over to people?
I would say, as we mentioned, entering MedComms at entry, I think you really need to be clear on why you want to enter MedComms. You need to be clear on the transferable skills that you have, that you would be bringing, and also be clear on what side of MedComms you want to be entering. So whether that is on the account handling side, as a junior account executive, or whether that's more as an associate medical writer. And as we mentioned, there's a lot of resources on career guides and webinars previously to get a real feel for the industry and a feel for what would be best suited. But in terms of like speaking to junior candidates and the process, we found that a lot of our clients are looking for that life science background, but really that passion. It's the passion for the agency, a real interest in what they're doing, and then the desire to take the science they have, and maybe they've done a placement year, or maybe they've done an internship, which is relevant, and take that and enter it into the industry.
Okay. Just picking up on the researching, I think Katia was talking earlier on in one of her questions about how do you go about researching, and I guess the simple answer is websites, sites like mine and so on. But she asked a specific question in terms of salaries. Have you got any advice for people, particularly, I guess, into the business? We've just had another question coming in about, you know, as an entry level person, how do I even know what the salaries are, sort of thing, and how can I negotiate around that? Have you got any sort of pointers for people? Maz, you're nodding. Do you want to put something in there?
I was keeping background noise. Yeah, I think in terms of salary benchmarking, I know that certainly you've done salary surveys alongside other recruitment agencies and things. It is really frustrating when you don't see salary levels on job adverts, which is really, really common. And I understand that that's really frustrating for people. I think we always have a salary banding on our job specs. So if you want to go onto our website and have a look, you'll get a rough idea of what an AE might be paid. We don't have lots of sort of junior medical writer roles up there, but there might be one or two. So you get a rough idea. Feel free to speak to us about that. But I think the reason that agencies don't always put a salary level on is it's not necessarily fixed. So they will take into account your experience. I saw a couple of questions around coming in as a postdoc or having the PhD, whether that means you should be applying for more senior roles. It's something that we come across a lot. If we put up an advert for, say, a senior medical writer, we'll get people who have done a PhD but haven't worked in an agency applying, which is understandable. But unfortunately, agencies don't see it that way, because you've never worked in an agency. Despite all the transferable skills, you will pretty much need to start at entry level. So I hope that answers a couple of people's questions. But I do quite often speak to people who have done the PhD and find the entry level salaries a little bit low for all the experience that they feel they have, which is fair enough. But I think what I would say is that salaries do accelerate quite quickly. Once you've got a few years under your belt, you will really be in a good position. And as we've all been talking about, the demand is so high that should increase pretty quickly. So despite the fact you would have to be going for entry-level roles, that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's absolute, but as a general point, most people would say if you're coming into the business, you're going to start at the entry level. The fact of the matter is, though, people can move very quickly from there if you've got that additional experience and so on. Having said that, there's always the this is an agency business and people can be a bit flexible, sort of thing. So there's no problem having a conversation about it. But I think people need to understand they're coming in at an entry level into a new business and having to learn the business, and that sort of requires a certain sort of mentality, as it were, or thought process. We've had a couple of questions coming in, and I think I skipped over it, but I was heading in that direction earlier on in terms of this remote working and so on, because we're going to be having a conversation which is quite UK specific here, and we should recognise that we've got people from around the world listening to us. There are tax and legal problems or challenges to hire people outside of the country. So flexible working, I can work anywhere in the world, sort of thing, doesn't work quite like that in practice, sort of thing. So if you're in Singapore or whatever, you're probably not going to be able to easily get an associate medical writer or even a medical writer's job in the UK because of the tax and legal implications. I know that varies in different countries. Freelancing, again, we said, is very different. But I think that covered, a couple of questions are coming in on that sort of front, which we should just sort of go. The reality is, in the UK now, we can have, agencies in the south taking on people in Scotland. That in itself is exciting, but they're not going to be taking on people outside the country so easily. Is that a fair point?
Absolutely, yes. And we're actually shocked by how much that is the case. For entry level people, it's very, very difficult. But even for experienced people, if they're not spending at least 6 months of the year in the UK and have a setup as a UK citizen or with a UK visa, it's pretty much impossible from our point of view. And we've tried and tried and tried. But so much for this global workplace, it's just the reality is not quite so straightforward, unfortunately.
Yeah. Coupled with the fact there's a huge amount of competition to get in, so to some extent the agencies are going to go, well, it's too complicated going that direction. Carla's asking a question about the good and bad things to look for in contracts. Can anyone talk a little bit to that? What would you be suggesting to someone, or what you would be looking out for as a good or a bad point within a contract, if you can answer that question?
I think, depending on what level you're at, notice periods. If you're entry level, I wouldn't really expect it to be more than a month. But we're seeing people as junior as account manager being put on 3-month notice periods now,
right.
Which seems ridiculous. Anything more than 3 months. It is a lot. And we can see why the agencies are doing it. They're desperate to hang on to people. They've got so much work coming in. Notice periods is the key thing. I think what else I see that's a deal breaker on contracts. Don't expect to have details of bonus on your contract or anything stipulated about when you'll get promoted. These things will, you'll more than likely get them, and the HR people or the line managers will say, look, we have paid a bonus every year for the last 10 years. We see no reason why we won't continue to do so, but we are not going to put that in the contract. So that's, since time memorial, no one's ever put that in the contract. So don't be shocked not to see that. What else? If you have negotiated to work from home so many days per week or completely, and that's not in there, then I think that's reasonable to ask to have that put in. And I would do so now, so that you don't get somebody further down the line saying, well, I wasn't around when that was agreed, and blah, blah, blah. Get that written in.
Julia, sorry to interrupt. Someone's mentioned restrictive non-competes. That's not something that I've seen huge amounts of. Is that something?
Yes, that happens a lot. That's I'm afraid there's not a lot you can do about that. Just watch the length of time it's for. It depends on seniority. So if you're a client services director, you may have a non-compete for 12 months. Further down the line, it could be lower, but they're pretty standard.
Having said that, on that front, it's quite difficult. Also, my understanding has always been it's quite difficult because you know where the company's trying to put that in place, but you can't actually stop someone doing work. So there's a sort of an area in there that I think everyone on all sides has to be a little bit careful of. Yeah, you can't just go. You can't work in this business for the next year, full stop, and and then expect to get away with that. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. They might say you can't work for their clients, but you can't say you can't work in the industry. No, that would not
be restricting your employment. Yeah. Okay. We've got quite a few questions actually coming in here. I'm just wondering what we should pick up on. The point I was talking to someone the other day about the problem is about. And just this is a practical problem now in terms of how did she phrase it? It was like compressed working hours, so 4 days as opposed to 5, and there's a move to sort of like squash the hours into fewer days, sort of thing. Is that something you're seeing generally across the business?
Yes, some places have trialled it, and there seem to be pros and cons. So a lot of people will say, well, I've negotiated to do a 4-day week, but I end up doing either 5 days in that 4 days, so or I work on my alleged day off. So I'm just the reality is I'm doing just as much work but being paid less. Mm-hmm. So I think this will come down to individual cases and your ability to put boundaries in place. If you know that you're somebody who can't say no, perhaps don't go for that. If you can manage your boundaries, they can be really good. And other things along that line are unlimited paid holidays. That's not quite the fantastic bonus it sounds like, because it's still subject to getting your work done, making sure that you're not overloading your team members, it doesn't clash with anyone else, etc., etc. So the reality of the places that offer unlimited paid holidays, that people tend not to take more than 30 to 35.
Just a couple of quick questions. We are going to start running out of time, really, but Kathy's asking this question as well, which seems a sort of very straightforward. I just wonder what you would say to this. Comment: at what point do you hand in your notice? Should it only be after you've accepted your offer in writing? So I guess there's a little bit of a grey area in there, is it?
Yes. To err on the side of caution, I would say once you have got the contract in writing, you don't have to have signed it, but you've got it from them. Once you've seen a contract and you're happy with it, and it doesn't say something wildly different to what was agreed verbally, then do it. There are plenty of people who will think, well, look, this is a great big network organisation. They've given me their word. I know the person who's hiring me, worked for her in the past, completely trust them. Their legal team's out on a Beano. I'm not going to get the contract for 3 days. My manager's only in tomorrow. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it now. But to err on the side, I think it's perfectly reasonable to say I verbally accept, subject to contract, and then your actual acceptance is when you've seen the contract, and that's when you resign.
Okay. What about a question I thought I saw that came in? Maybe, and again, I'm sort of going for the entry level side a bit with you. If we quite often get the question, I'm sure I've seen it in there somewhere. How much in advance should people be applying for an entry level job if they're currently maybe writing up their PhD or something like that? Do you have any thoughts or guidance on that?
There's no harm in making contacts and applying to agencies that you like the look of, but do state up front, don't waste their time. Tell them, look, I can't start till next September, but yours is an agency I like the look of, thought it would be good to make contact with you now. So you're not strictly applying, but you're making yourself known, and if you can impress them and enter into a dialogue there, you're going to be the one they think of. And you may even find you get an offer with a crazy forward start date. It can happen. So up to you, really. I think you need to have a firm idea of when you're going to be able to start. Don't be, oh well, I think I might roughly be free in a couple of years. Obviously not then, but.
But one of the things, again, in my experience, I mean, a lot of the people, I mean, let's take that sort of PhD situation, which is not uncommon, particularly amongst medical writers. You'll tend to be talking to people in the MedComms agency. Quite a few have got PhDs. They've been through the process. There's certainly a lot of experience going through the process. There's quite a lot of understanding of the fact that it's going to take you a bit of time to get through that process. There's quite a lot. Certainly, I get the impression there's quite a lot of flexibility. If they like you, there will be some flexibility there, and they understand the process that you're going to have to go through, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's more likely if you're in some of the graduate programs, obviously, like where they have certain intakes. Where they have
a fixed date, yeah.
Then that's fine. You'll know about that in advance. If you're applying to or any of these sort of programs that are run by the big agencies, they will have a start date published. If they don't have a start date published, it probably means they want you to start as soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Look, we ought to wrap this up. Let's have a final question. Thomas has been asking. You've been saying this is a period of excess, I think, excess demand, and we're sort of, I think, Julia, you sort of implied that it might not last forever, but any sense of, is this a 2021 thing, a 2022 thing, or a 2020s thing?
I'd say we're good for a good few months yet. Some industries are starting to see the market soften slightly. We're not. So healthcare. I mean, the demand will always be high for experienced healthcare people. Well, I'll be very, very surprised if it wasn't. Always has been, always will be. But the unprecedented period now where you can you get the best deal going, probably 3 or 4 months, because I think probably in January policies are going to start being put in place. So it's probably start to get a bit harder to get some of the flexibility.
I see. Okay. But certainly in my experience, and I've been running MedComms networking for 15 years, let alone what I was doing beforehand, everybody in MedComms is always crying out for people. It's gone to a whole different level in the last year or so. And it's sort of got to calm down a little bit as naturally things happen. But there isn't, MedComms is a good, healthy business. People worry sometimes about coming into MedComms, into an agency. Am I secure? I think the reality is there's a big future for MedComms, all aspects of MedComms. If you get some good training in an agency, you've got a very bright future ahead of you, whether you want to go freelance in the end or whether you want to work within the agency environment. There's always going to be demand. And quite a lot of demand for people. So I think this is a very, very attractive career for people to take. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground there, and in your presentation you covered a lot of questions off, which was great. I'm going to wrap this up now. I'm a little bit over time as usual, so let me wrap this up now. Say a huge thanks to you guys for joining in and hopefully encouraging people to have a think around what's going on. I know that I can say for you that you're very happy for people to contact you via LinkedIn. That's the easy way, or you've given your email addresses and your website address and so on. But basically, you'd love to hear from people, and you've said, and I'll say again on your behalf, I know you're very happy for people to contact you and just ask for a sort of a review of your CV and so on. So please, if someone's watching and wants a bit of advice, please take advantage of that. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. I'm going to say goodbye to you guys. Audience members, you don't have to disappear because we will carry on for a few minutes. So thank you very much, everybody. Give a bit of a wave while I stop the recording, and everyone take care and stay safe. Okay, bye-bye.